Most raised beds are not a gardening upgrade. They're a 5-year structure sold as a 20-year solution. And if you build the standard version this spring, there's a very real chance you'll be rebuilding it before your first fruit trees even mature. Every year, thousands of gardeners spend hundreds of dollars on lumber, soil, screws, and hardware, thinking they're building permanent infrastructure. They measure, they cut, they assemble clean rectangles, they fill them with soil, and for the first few seasons, everything works. The beds look organized, drainage improves, plants grow better than they did in compacted ground. It feels like a smart, long-term investment. Then year 3 or 4 arrives. Boards begin to bow, corners soften, soil settles, and what looked permanent starts collapsing from the inside out. Most people assume they chose the wrong wood, so they rebuild with cedar, or thicker boards, or more expensive fasteners. And the cycle repeats. The problem isn't the lumber, it's the design. Raised beds, as most people build them, are structured to fail. Not because gardeners are careless, but because the design ignores how soil, water, oxygen, and biology behave over time. And there's one material almost everyone adds that makes the failure happen faster. I'll show you what that is in a few minutes. But first, we need to talk about what's actually happening inside that box. Because the real issue isn't visible from the outside. It's biological, structural, and cumulative. What no one tells you before you build. When most people research raised beds, they get identical advice. Use untreated wood, avoid pressure-treated lumber, fill with a soil mix. Plant and enjoy. The instructions focus on construction. They almost never discuss lifespan. Untreated pine in contact with moist soil typically lasts 3 to 5 years. Cedar, often marketed as long-lasting, begins to deteriorate within 7 to 10 years in wet conditions, and the interior face of a raised bed is exposed to constant moisture pressure. That's the part no one explains. The inside of the board stays damp longer than the outside, and damp wood plus oxygen plus warmth equals microbial decay. The tutorials assume you're building for convenience and appearance, not for a 20-year system, but wood doesn't care about your intent. It follows physics, and physics doesn't negotiate. It responds to moisture gradients, temperature shifts, and microbial presence, not marketing claims or weekend enthusiasm. What makes this worse is that most gardeners accelerate the problem with their watering schedule. When you water a raised bed from above, moisture doesn't just soak into the soil. It splashes against the interior walls. That splash zone stays wet for hours after the soil surface has dried. During summer, when beds are watered daily or every other day, the wood never gets a chance to dry completely. The damage is cumulative, not sudden. Year 1, the wood looks perfect. Year 2, microscopic cracks form. Year 3, those cracks widen. Water penetrates deeper. Fungi establish colonies. Year 4, the board feels soft when pressed. Year 5, it crumbles. And because this process happens slowly, most people don't connect the decline to the original design choice. They just assume wood doesn't last and rebuild. Why wood and wet soil don't coexist long-term? Wood rots when 3 conditions are present: moisture, oxygen, and warmth. A raised bed provides all 3 continuously. The soil inside holds water. Irrigation adds more. Rain hits from outside. The interior surface absorbs moisture from the soil side. The exterior face absorbs humidity and precipitation. The board never fully dries. And here's what accelerates the problem. Microbial life in soil actively breaks down organic material. That includes wood. You've essentially pressed a biodegradable material against a living compost ecosystem and expected it to remain intact for decades. Even cedar eventually loses its natural oils. Once small cracks form, water penetrates deeper. Fungal colonies establish. The rot moves inward. Most gardeners don't notice until boards crumble during a rebuild. By that point, the decay has already been active for years. Here's something rarely mentioned. Wood rot doesn't happen evenly. The bottom board rots first because it's in constant contact with soil moisture. The corners rot second because water pools where 2 boards meet. The top board lasts longest because it has the most exposure to air. This creates a structural problem. When the bottom board fails but the top board is still solid, the bed doesn't collapse all at once. It sags. Soil pressure pushes outward on weakened wood. The bed bulges. And once one corner fails, stress redistributes to the remaining corners, accelerating their failure. This is why raised beds often seem fine until suddenly they're not. The failure appears sudden, but the biology behind it has been working quietly the entire time. The soil isolation problem. When you build a raised bed, you isolate the soil from the surrounding ecosystem. It becomes a contained environment. That means no deep-root mineral cycling from subsoil, no natural replenishment from below. Limited biological continuity. Everything inside that bed must be manually maintained. In year 1, performance is excellent. High organic matter, loose structure, strong drainage. But organic matter decomposes, microbes consume it. Water leaches nutrients, plants extract fertility. Soil levels drop. A 12-inch bed becomes 10 inches, then 8. Unless you add compost every year, performance declines. That topping off cost accumulates quietly. $40 per bed annually over 20 years? That's $800 per bed. Now multiply that by 4 beds, and suddenly your simple garden has turned into a multi-thousand-dollar maintenance cycle. And that assumes consistency. If you skip maintenance for even one season, the decline accelerates. There's another aspect of soil isolation that affects plant performance. When soil is disconnected from the ground, it lacks thermal mass. Ground soil stays cooler in summer and warmer in winter because it's connected to the Earth's stable temperature below. Raised bed soil heats up faster in spring, which seems like an advantage, but it also overheats in summer and freezes deeper in winter. Roots experience more temperature stress. Plants bolt earlier in heat. They need more water because soil dries faster. This thermal instability is invisible but measurable, and over multiple seasons it changes plant resilience in ways most gardeners don't immediately recognize. The plastic liner mistake. Remember that material I mentioned earlier? Plastic. Landscape fabric, pond liner, heavy plastic sheeting. Many gardeners line the inside of their raised beds thinking it protects the wood. It doesn't. It traps moisture. Instead of allowing the board to dry toward the soil side, plastic seals water against it. Condensation builds. Moisture remains in constant contact. Rot accelerates. What feels protective actually speeds decay. Wood survives longest when it can dry between wet cycles. Plastic removes that ability. It creates the perfect environment for fungal growth. This is one of the most common well-intentioned mistakes in raised bed construction. And it's rarely mentioned in tutorials that focus primarily on appearance. Here's why this mistake is so widespread. When gardeners research raised beds, they find conflicting advice. Some sources say to line beds to prevent soil contact with wood. Others say never to line beds because it traps moisture. The truth is that lining makes sense only if you're using treated lumber and want to prevent soil contact with chemicals. But if you're using untreated wood or cedar specifically because it's safe for food growing, lining defeats the purpose. You've chosen safe wood, then blocked it from soil anyway. And in the process, you've created a moisture trap that guarantees faster rot. The true 20-year cost. Let's run conservative numbers. Initial bed build, $400. Annual compost, $40. Over 20 years, $800 in compost. 2 cedar rebuilds, $400. Total, $1,600. 4 beds, $6,400. And that doesn't include labor, hardware, or your time. Now compare that to a mounded in-ground system. Initial compost addition, permanent pathways, annual compost, no lumber replacements, no structural rebuilds. Over 20 years, the cost gap becomes dramatic, and the in-ground system improves over time instead of resetting every few years. But the financial cost is only part of the equation. There's an opportunity cost that's harder to quantify. Every weekend you spend rebuilding beds is a weekend you're not gardening. Every dollar spent on replacement lumber is a dollar not spent on tools, seeds, or expanding your growing area. Gardens that improve year after year create compounding returns. Better soil grows healthier plants with less intervention. But gardens that require constant infrastructure maintenance never reach that compounding phase. Drainage, the hidden reality. Many people build raised beds for drainage, but here's the question. Is elevation the only solution? If you dig a 12-inch test hole and fill it with water, if it drains within 4 to 6 hours, drainage is adequate. If it drains slowly but consistently, adding organic matter to in-ground beds often solves the issue. Raised beds improve drainage by elevating soil above compacted ground. But so do mounded rows, so do broad forking and soil conditioning. Elevation is not the only drainage tool, it's simply the most marketed one. Here's what actually controls drainage: soil texture, structure, and organic matter content. When you build a raised bed and fill it with purchased soil mix, you're essentially importing better texture and structure. But you could achieve the same result by improving existing soil in place. The reason raised beds feel easier is because they allow you to start fresh, with imported soil instead of rehabilitating existing soil. But long-term, rehabilitated soil connected to the ground outperforms isolated raised bed soil. When raised beds actually make sense. Raised beds are justified when your soil is contaminated, drainage is severely compromised, or physical limitations require elevation. If those apply, raised beds are practical. But if you're building them because that's what gardening looks like, you may be solving a problem you don't have and creating one you didn't anticipate. Let's be specific about contamination. If you live near a pre-1978 home, lead paint may have contaminated soil. If you're near a busy road, lead from leaded gasoline may be present. If your property was formerly industrial, heavy metals may persist. In these cases, raised beds with imported clean soil are the correct solution. Similarly, if your yard has a high water table that keeps soil saturated for weeks, raising beds above that saturation zone makes sense. And if mobility issues make ground-level gardening painful, waist-high beds are worth the investment. These are legitimate uses, but they represent a minority of raised bed construction. The 20-year alternative. If you want true longevity, you have options. Option 1. In-ground beds with permanent pathways. Define growing areas. Mulch pathways. Improve soil annually. Let biology compound. Option 2. Mounded hybrid beds. Raise soil 6 to 10 inches. Keep it connected to subsoil. Avoid full wood containment. Option 3. Permanent materials. Stone, concrete block, or metal stock tanks. Higher upfront cost. Lower lifetime cost. No rebuild cycle. The key principle: designed for decades, not seasons. The mounded hybrid approach deserves explanation because it's underused despite being highly effective. Instead of building a box, you shape existing soil into raised rows 6 to 12 inches higher than pathways. You can edge these mounds with rocks or low boards for definition, but the edges aren't load-bearing. Soil stays connected to the ground below. Water infiltrates naturally. And when mounds settle, you simply add compost and reshape. No rebuilding. No replacement. The maintenance trap. When you build 4 raised beds in one spring, you start 4 decay clocks simultaneously. Year 4, Year 8, Year 12. You are rebuilding on rotation. Instead of compounding fertility, you're replacing infrastructure. The garden becomes an ongoing construction project. That's the maintenance trap, and it's invisible until you're inside it. This becomes obvious when you talk to gardeners who've been at it for 15 or 20 years. First build with pine, lasted 3 years. Rebuilt with cedar, lasted 7 years. Rebuilt again with thicker cedar. By the third rebuild, they've spent more on lumber than they would have spent on stone beds that would still be intact. The real question: do you want a garden that peaks early and declines or improves every year? In-ground systems improve. Wood systems decay. That's the biological truth. Here's the difference in year 15. A raised bed garden has been rebuilt at least once, possibly twice. Soil performs worse than year 1. An in-ground garden has deeper topsoil, accumulated organic matter, established biology, and requires less fertilizer. The garden looks effortless because the system is doing the work. What to do before you build this spring? Before you buy lumber, test drainage, test soil contamination, assess physical needs, calculate 20-year costs. Then decide. Because the 20-year mistake isn't choosing pine over cedar. It's building a temporary structure when you meant to build permanence. Raised beds are tools. Use them when necessary. Skip them when they aren't. Because systems outlast materials. And if you design your garden like a system instead of a weekend project, you won't be rebuilding it while your neighbors are harvesting from soil that's finally matured.